Hello everybody! In this video I'm going to be talking about the circle of fifths and how to memorize your key signatures of the circle of fifths. So what is it? Well, the circle of fifths is a visual representation of the key signatures in Western music. It shows the relationship between each of the major and minor keys, and it shows how many sharps or flats you have in each of the keys. It begins with C major, and with each new key signature, it is exactly a perfect fifth higher than the last key signature. And if you keep following this pattern all the way around, it will come back around to C major, hence the name, the circle of fifths. While the circle of fifths is a really good teaching tool and representation for key signatures, I do find that it is a bit tricky to memorize when you're first learning about it. Back when I was a kid, my teacher used this method called the sharp chart with me, and I find that is actually a lot easier for memorizing your key signatures. So in this video, I'm going to be using the sharp chart on one side of the screen and the circle of fifths on the other side of the screen as I talk about these concepts. I'll also be using my own violin finger chart application that I have made. It shows the piano keyboard and the violin finger chart, so that way people who are violinists and not necessarily pianists can still follow along pretty easily. If you would like to use this application yourself, I'll have a link for download in the description. So the first thing that we need to know about the circle of fifths is the order of which the major keys go in. So there's a little trick. Of course, you can come up with a completely different phrase as long as it works with the correct letters. So for memorizing the key signature for the sharps, you think of Father Charles goes down and ends battle. I said before that the circle of fifths actually starts with C, so we're not actually going to start with Father. We're going to start right at Charles goes down and ends in battle with getting our circle started. So if I type this into my sharp chart, we know we start with our first key being C major, and then we go on to the next word in the phrase, which is goes. So that would be G, down, and A, ends, E, battle, B. And then after you finish the phrase, it comes back around again because it's a circle. So the next letter is Father, F. Be careful, this is not F major, this is F sharp major. And then the next one, we've already had C major, right? So what we have here is actually C sharp major. Now, how did this come about? Well, it is a circle of fifths, and as I mentioned before, they are all fifths apart. So let's see it on the piano and violin and music staff, so we have a really good visual musical representation of what this phrase, Father Charles goes down and ends battle, actually means. So we start off with C, so that's for Charles, goes, G, down, and ends battle. And you notice these are all perfect fifths apart, and that's very apparent on the violin finger chart here. All the notes are right across from each other on each of the strings. If you like, take a moment to pause and really analyze what this means on the piano or on the music staff or on the violin, whichever is most comfortable for you. Now are the flat keys if we keep going around in our circle. So the flats, how I remember them, is you spell out the word bead, and then the last two letters in the flats are G and C, G flat and C flat. So a trick in order to remember that it's the G and C that I came up with for myself, it's actually a little funny. My brother's name starts with a G, and then my name starts with a C. So I always kind of remembered it as my brother comes before me because he's the favorite. He's not actually. Our parents love us both very much. But that's just how I remembered it before I started to really understand the relationship between the fifths. So the flats always start with F, F major, and then we spell out bead. So the next flat will be B flat, then E flat, A flat, and D flat. And then, of course, there is G flat and C flat. And let's see it on the finger chart. So starting with F, then going up a
perfect fourth
to B flat. And we're spelling the word bead, remember? So it would then be E flat, and then A flat, and D flat, then G flat or F sharp, and C flat or B. And you can see here again all the nicely spaced out
perfect fourth
intervals. And now that we know the major key letter names, we need to know how many sharps or how many flats are included in each of these keys. Well, there is a trick for that. The first one for C major is easy to remember. It has no sharps or flaps. And then if we go to the next one, it has one sharp. Now, how do we know which sharp is that? Well, you could go through the pattern of whole tones and semitones for the G major scale and figure out which one of those notes is an accidental, or you can think about the phrase again. Father Charles goes down and ends battle. It is the same pattern of sharps as it is with the naming of the key. So, the very first letter in the phrase is F. So for G major, it will have an F sharp, and it has only one sharp. And now we go down to D major. So we know since D major is the next key in the pattern, it will have two sharps. So we know it will already have an F sharp, and then the next sharp in the phrase, Father Charles, will be C. So we'll fill that in here on our sharp chart. Next, for A major, we'll go again, Father Charles, and then the next word in the phrase is goes. It will be a G sharp. And E major will have four sharps. So we count it out. Father Charles goes down. And you see how it's starting to fall together on the chart? And B major, let's just copy and paste to make it a little bit quicker. And what is the word after down? And A sharp, ends, battle. Father Charles goes down and ends battle. So we finished the sharp side of the chart, and then there's the flat side. So how do we remember that? Well, like how we use the same phrasing for the sharp key signature pattern, we use the same phrasing for the flat key signature pattern. So we know with F major, it has a B flat. And then B flat, of course, has a B flat in it. And then it also has another flat, another accidental. So we know that it will be the next letter in the phrase. So in our phrase for the flat keys, we first spell out the word bead. So we have a B flat, and then the next letter will be E flat in the word bead, right? So it has an E flat. And we'll go over this again. For E flat, the next letter will be A flat. And for A flat major, it will have a B flat, an E flat, and A flat. And the last letter in the word bead is D. So we'll have a D flat. Now we're getting to the end of our word bead. So we're just going to have to memorize or count a perfect fifth above D flat. So we know that a perfect fifth above D flat is G flat. So we'll have a G flat that is included in D flat major. And I'll just copy and paste here. In G flat major, there are 6 flats, and the one flat ahead of G flat is C flat. So it will include a C flat. And copy and paste that here. And for C flat major, what will be the last flat in this key? Well, it will come all the way back around. So starting at the beginning of the pattern, we started with an F for our flat keys, right? So this will have an F flat. And now there's one more section that we need to fill out in our chart or our circle of fifths. And that is the names of the minor keys. So the relative minor key will have the same key signature as its relative major key because of what note it starts on and how it follows the pattern of whole tones and semitones in the natural minor key. It just has the same key signature. So with the minor keys, we start off with A minor. How do I know that? Well, there is a trick for the minors, and I wrote it down here. You count 3 semitones down from the major tonic. Start with the A minor key and count up in perfect fifths. So what do I actually mean by that when I say count 3 semitones down from a major tonic or count up by perfect fifths? Well, let's look at our piano and fingerchart app for that. So if we start off at C major and we count down 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, we end up on the note A. So A minor is the relative minor to C major. And we can apply that logic to any other note name. Let's say E. Start off, we're in E major, and then if we count 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, we land on C sharp / D flat. So C sharp / D flat minor is the relative minor of E major. Or how about G? If we start off at G major, count 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, we end up with E. So E minor is the relative minor of G major. Now, how about the other way that I spoke of? If you start off with A minor, then you just count up, again, perfect fifths, to find out the rest of the letter names for the minor keys. So what is a perfect fifth above A? Well, on the violin finger chart, it's pretty obvious. You just move across your strings. So that would be E. So the next minor key would be E. And above that is B. Above that is F sharp, G flat. And it just keeps going and going up fifths until you come back around to A, because this is a circle. So let's fill that into our chart. So we start off with A minor. If you want, you can pause the video and guess what the answer is before I write it down. So the relative minor of G major is E. The relative minor of D major would be B. And then of A, F sharp. And the relative of E major would be C sharp. And then relative minor of B major is G sharp. And now relative minor of F sharp major would be D sharp, E flat. And to C sharp, if you count back 3 semitones, it would be A sharp / B flat. And now we move on to the flats. So 3 semitones below F would be D. And now, before I said that you count up a perfect fifth for the minor keys, and that is true for the sharps. But since we're filling out the flats, we are actually going around the circle of fifths in the opposite direction. So before we were going clockwise, and now we are going counterclockwise around the circle. So because of that, we are actually counting up in perfect fourths instead of perfect fifths because we're going backwards. So you need to keep that in mind when you're filling out the flat side of your chart if you are counting the spaces between minor keys instead of counting down 3 semitones from the major relative key. So here, if we go up a perfect fourth from D, we would get G. So G minor for B flat major. Also, if you count down 3 semitones from B flat, I'll show it here. B flat, and then 1, 2, 3, we get G. B flat, G. Going on to E flat, a perfect fourth away from G, or 3 semitones away from E flat is C, so C minor. And 3 semitones away from A flat would be F, F minor. And then a perfect fourth up from F, or a 3 semitones down from D flat. That would be B flat. And now getting down to the last two, 3 semitones down from G flat would be E flat / D sharp. And the next one, 3 semitones down from C flat. Now, C flat is a kind of a weird one because usually we call that B natural, right? So let's look at the piano. C flat, so if we start at C, is here, and then count down 3 semitones. 1, 2, 3. So we landed on G sharp / A flat. So A flat. And that is our sharp chart / circle of fifths. Now, if you are doing this for an exam, you do have to go through it pretty quickly. So I suggest for an exam, you first write down your circle of fifths or a shorthand of this chart, and then you have a reference for when you're answering your questions. A shorthand that I did was I wouldn't fill out all these extra F sharps or all these extra C sharps in my chart. I would just write a line straight down saying that, okay, all the rest of these key signatures has that same accidental. And then I would only write these letters right here that I'm highlighting. It just made it a lot faster for my theory exams this way. I suggest you practice writing out the chart or the circle of fifths just to get it into habit, because it really does help you and it helps you understand your major and minor scales as well. And that was my video all about the circle of fifths and key signatures. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.